Silent Confessions, a story of choices, truth, and resilience. Welcome to Silent Confessions, where secrets are revealed and hearts are laid bare. Today, I'm sharing a story I've kept hidden for years, something that feels like a scene straight out of a drama, but is deeply rooted in my real life. This is a story of choices, mistakes, and consequences that forever changed the course of my life. My name is Sophia, and I grew up in a picturesque little town in Colorado, nestled in a valley surrounded by towering mountains and endless pine forests. My childhood was painted with the warmth of family. My dad, Alex, a charming and charismatic man who owned a cozy cafe in town, and my mom, Laura, a passionate literature teacher who could make poetry come alive with her words. To anyone looking in, my life seemed picture perfect, and for a long time, it truly was. Every night, my mom would read to me from her favorite novels, her voice soft and soothing as I drifted off to sleep. Every Saturday, my dad and I had a tradition. We'd hike to a nearby clearing to pick wildflowers, and he'd tell me stories of his younger days. For years, I lived in a bubble of love and security that felt unbreakable. But life has a way of shifting beneath your feet when you least expect it. As I grew older, I began to notice subtle changes in my family. My dad, once a rock of dependability, seemed distracted. His laughter, which used to fill our home, became rarer. His eyes, which had always been full of warmth, now held a distance I couldn't quite place. My mom, too, seemed to retreat into herself. She'd spend long hours grading papers, her gaze often lost in thought. It was like there was a silent storm brewing, one that no one wanted to acknowledge. Then came the night that changed everything. I had just turned 18. To celebrate, my dad took me out to my favorite Italian restaurant. It was unusual. He wasn't one for spontaneous outings, especially not just the two of us. As we sat at a candlelit table, he was unusually attentive, asking me about my dreams, my fears, my plans for the future. His eyes, though, told a different story. They seemed heavy, as if carrying a burden too great to bear. I felt flattered by the attention, but also unnerved, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't quite see. When we got home, my mom was out visiting an old friend and wouldn't be back until the next day. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that wraps around you and makes you feel exposed. My dad and I ended up in the living room, sipping tea as the conversation turned deeper. For the first time, he spoke to me not just as a parent, but as a person, raw, vulnerable, and deeply flawed. He started sharing stories from his past, things I'd never heard before. There was a weight to his words, a sense of confession that made my heart race. And then, he told me something that shattered the image I had of him. Years ago, before I was born, he had an affair. It wasn't just a fleeting mistake, it was a relationship that had left scars on his soul and ripples in our family. He'd ended it before I came into the picture, but the guilt had followed him like a shadow, influencing every decision he'd made as a husband and father. Hearing this, I felt a storm of emotions. My dad, the man I'd put on a pedestal my entire life, was suddenly human, flawed, fragile, and painfully real. As he spoke, tears welled up in his eyes, and I could see the regret etched into his face. He wasn't just telling me this to unburden himself. He wanted me to understand the complexity of love and the weight of choices. He admitted that the affair had left cracks in his relationship with my mom, cracks they'd worked hard to mend over the years, but that had never fully disappeared. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was racing with questions and doubts. What did this mean for our family? Did my mom know? And if she did, how had she endured the weight of it all these years? I found myself replaying every interaction I'd seen between my parents, looking for signs I'd missed, moments that now carried new meaning. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt betrayed, not just for my mom, but for myself. The image of my perfect family was crumbling, and I was left to pick up the pieces. I also struggled with the burden of this secret. My dad had entrusted me with something so personal, but it felt like a betrayal to keep it from my mom. Yet a part of me understood why he'd told me. He wanted me to learn from his mistakes, to see the cost of dishonesty and the fragility of trust. Eventually, I decided to confront my mom. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was one I felt I had to have. When I told her what my dad had revealed, she wasn't shocked. She already knew. She'd known for years, but had chosen to stay and rebuild their life together. She said something that stayed with me. Love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to stay, even when it's hard. She explained that she had made her decision not out of weakness, but out of a desire to protect our family and give me the life she thought I deserved. She talked about the therapy they'd gone through, the late-night conversations, and the quiet compromises that had slowly stitched their relationship back together. Their love wasn't the unshakable foundation I'd always believed it to be, but it was real, with all its flaws and complexities. I realized that what they shared wasn't a fairy tale, but a partnership that had weathered storms and come out stronger in its own imperfect way. This story isn't just mine. It's a reflection on the value of truth and the consequences of our actions. No matter how difficult it is to face reality, it's always better than living in the shadow of a lie. If you've ever faced a similar situation or have thoughts to share, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Silent Confessions for more stories that touch the heart and make us think. Thank you for listening, and remember, every day it's a chance to learn.